you to our talk this afternoon. We're glad that you could join us to hear Marcy Hamilton speak about an issue that should be important to all of us. The topic is watersheds of Southwest Michigan. What are they? Why we need them, and how to protect them. We're recording this presentation to be posted on YouTube. You can find the link on our website in a few days. Please silence your cell phones and remind me to do that too, because I haven't yet. The question and answer will be at the end of Marcy's presentation. And there's an official looking gentleman standing over there near the camera. He's going to be in charge of that. He's really good at handling questions. Not always the answers you want to hear, but since this is a public presentation, I want to state that the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization. The League works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, such as making sure that we all have the life-giving resource of clean water. The League also works to influence public policy through education and advocacy, and supports measures that will protect our water quality, reduce water pollution, protect our lakes, streams, wetlands, and watersheds. The League of Women Voters does not support or oppose any political party or candidate for elective office or any group that supports candidates. And even though we're called the League of Women Voters, it's not just for women. All are welcome. If you're not currently a member, please stop at the welcome desk for membership information. It's time now to present our presenter for you to meet Marcy Hamilton. She's the Deputy Executive Director, Senior Planner of the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. She is an experienced senior planner who has developed a track record of implementing successful projects for a variety of clients around the Southwest Michigan region. She has a wealth of experience writing master and recreation plans, facilitating planning processes, and developing grants and implementing projects in watershed planning, economic development, and recreation. In 2017, she was promoted to also serve as Deputy Executive Director. Marcy was the project director for the Watershed River Watershed Project with the Cass County Conservation District from 1999 to 2002. She holds a bachelor's degree in biology and environmental science studies from Ohio Northern University and a Master of Environmental Science degree from Miami University, Ohio. Please welcome Marcy Hamilton.
All right, can you hear me? Yes. Working? Okay, good. All right, I don't like standing behind here, but I don't have a clicker, so I'll have to do that. Thanks for having me today. Glad to be here. I was just chatting with John back here. I've been here before, but it's been many, many years ago. And it seems even longer with the whole COVID shutdown, right? It's like time doesn't exist anymore. But thanks for having me. I just wanted to give an overview, a little bit of some water quality issues in Southwest Michigan. And gosh, it was really hard when Faith asked me to talk about water quality issues. There's probably like at least 20 different topics I could have talked about. Septic systems, native plants, if you go on and on, climate change, everything. So I just tried to pick a few topics that are timely, that we're working on right now, that kind of cover different areas of Southwest Michigan. So if you don't know my agency, the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission, we cover 3 counties, Berrien, Cass, and Van Buren counties. And we're the regional planning agency. We were created by the state of Michigan and then formed by the 3 counties. We're a small outfit of about 8 people, but we do all kinds of stuff. We do transportation planning that includes public transit and non-motorized trails. We do economic development, we do things like community planning, master plans, recreation plans. We also I do a lot of environmental work, a lot of public education around water quality, and trying to implement projects to improve our water resources. So we're small, but we're very diverse in the different issues that we get involved with. So today we're going to focus on watersheds in Southwest Michigan, and I mean, I don't have to tell you guys why water is important and why it matters to us, all the things that we use water for and need it for. What's really amazing is all the water resources that we do have in Southwest Michigan, the acres of water, the numbers of lakes, over 700 lakes in our 3 counties, over 1,000 miles of streams and rivers, over 55 miles of Lake Michigan shoreline. So, and then the major watersheds are listed there at the bottom, but I'll have a map here that I'll show you as soon as I make sure. I always start out, what is a watershed? Because a lot of people have said things like, isn't it a shed that you keep your water in, or all kinds of things. But it's basically a term that means all the land that drains to a common body of water. So obviously we're all here today in the watershed that I'm going to talk a little bit about. We're in the Ox Creek watershed, which flows into the Paw Paw River out to St. Joe and of course out to Lake Michigan. The whole of West Michigan flows into Lake Michigan watershed. Here's a map of that. So, worth a try. So this is the major watersheds in Southwest Michigan. Obviously the St. Joe is the largest with several sub-watersheds like the Paw Paw, the Green River down in New Buffalo, the Black River up in South Haven. We have a little piece of the Kalamazoo River watershed up in Van Buren County there, but that goes up, flows out at, obviously at Saugatuck. And then along the lake, that dark brown is just kind of direct drainage into Lake Michigan. There's a bunch of little creeks in those areas that drain to the lake. One thing I always want to start out with is, this is a map of the St. Joe River watershed, and I have the 3 counties here highlighted, is that we are very fortunate to still have a lot to protect in Southwest Michigan. This map is what it's indicating is a combination of different factors and ratings for high quality areas for protection. And if you look at Indiana, it's really red and not so worthy of protection. They've lost a lot of their natural resources. And as you can see, as you move into Michigan and to Southwest Michigan especially, a lot of green, which is good, a lot of good high scores for preservation. So what does this mean? You look around our landscape, we have beautiful sand dunes, wetlands, forests, beautiful rivers and streams that are still of pretty good quality overall. This is just another map of our 3 counties, kind of highlighting areas where there's still intact habitat that's worth protecting. And as you can see, a lot of it follows a lot of the waterways in our area, those wetlands and forested areas and things like that. So big pockets of kind of intact natural areas that we still have here. So lots of good stuff in Southwest Michigan that we still have an opportunity to protect and work on that. And of course, when we protect those wetlands and forest lands and all those lands, it helps protect the water quality that it's draining to. But then of course we do have issues with pollution, as does everybody. Just 2 types of pollution I want to talk about is point sources, or when it's coming from a direct pipe, like out of a factory or out of a wastewater treatment plant. And those are all been regulated with the Clean Water Act. And we've pretty much cleaned up a lot of that type of pollution. They all have permits, they have standards that they have to do in testing. So that's pretty much taken care of. The part of the pollution that's really hard to manage and deal with is what we call polluted runoff. And basically, that's just the rain coming down, the snow melt coming off the land into our waterways. And so it's just taking everything off the landscape with it into the waterways, whether it be fertilizers off of agricultural areas, it could be oils and greases off of parking lots, those kinds of things. So most of our pollution now that we're dealing with are from these kind of diverse areas and surfaces. So obviously not something really easy to regulate. You know, it's just kind of stuff that we're doing every day is contributing to it. And these are the types of things I mentioned. Agriculture, runoff from the ag fields is an issue. What I call car habitat, roads and parking lots, all the runoff from those areas, from our lawns, from our rooftops, from our golf courses, from construction sites. We do have some laws to try to control, especially construction sites, to make sure there's sediment fences up and things like that. But we can even have pollution from natural areas. If there's a lot of geese in an area, they could be contributing to water pollution from their droppings. So, but really our biggest pollutants that we see is sediment, dirt, that gets into our waterways and clogs our streams and natural areas, the nutrients that are often attached to the sediments, and also bacteria, E. coli. We have a lot of beach closures in this area over the years due to E. coli in our water. A lot of times that can come from septic systems, or even I've seen a lot where I did a study along Lake Michigan from pretty much Stevensville down to Michiana, looking at all those small little tributaries that go into Lake Michigan and thinking septic systems must be the reason why we're seeing so many beach closures. And actually, I could never really conclusively conclude that, but something that definitely I could conclude was an issue was a failing sanitary sewer infrastructure. That some of the pipes are just so old that it's just leaking out of the pipes. And again, that goes into that bigger issue of our aging infrastructure and how do we fix that and the costs associated with that. And of course, we mentioned the beach closures, fish kills, loss of habitat, you know, could even jeopardize our drinking water supplies. A lot of us get our drinking water from Lake Michigan, others get it from groundwater. Either way, these pollutants can move into either the groundwater or those surface water systems and jeopardize it. So that's just kind of a brief overview of our watersheds here and what kind of the major issues are. Then, like I said, I kind of wanted just to touch on three kind of major project areas that we've been working on lately to try to protect and improve our water quality here in Southwest Michigan. And I thought it would be appropriate today, since we're sitting in the Ox Creek Watershed, to talk about the Ox Creek Watershed. So you'll see the St. Joe River watershed is huge. It starts all the way over in Hillsdale County, goes down into Indiana, drains all of that agricultural land in northern Indiana, then comes back up into Michigan through Niles and Berrien Springs and out here at Benton Harbor, St. Joe. And the Ox Creek watershed is this small little watershed at the end here that starts out in Bainbridge Township, kind of where the new bypass is, just down here. Flows through Bainbridge and mostly Benton Charter Township, then hits the city of Benton Harbor. It bisects the city of Benton Harbor. It kind of follows, if you're familiar with Benton Harbor, Pipestone follows that. And it's a beautiful valley through the city. It's really forested, and it's really a wonderful natural valley right through the middle of Benton Harbor. So, but we have a lot of issues with water quality. I would say that this little watershed is probably one of our most challenged watersheds in Southwest Michigan in terms of water quality. And I'll talk a little bit about why that is. It's because of all the parking lots. And if you go over to the mall area, you see all of those parking lots. That's all that red area right there. That is impervious surfaces, rooftops, parking lots, roads. So that's the mall area. We're seeing all that red. They're right off of 94, the next exit there at Pipestone, right? So all that impervious surface is kind of, when that was built, they weren't thinking about how to manage the water off of that site in a way that protects our water resources. And that's just the way we did things back then. Now we know better that we need to manage our stormwater to deal with this. And this is just a graph that basically shows as you have an increase in impervious surface in a watershed, you start to see degradation of the streams. So why is this? So when you don't have much impervious surface, below 10% in your watershed area, there's a lot of area for that water to filter into the ground and into the groundwater. And then once you add in all this impervious surface, it starts running off. And how we used to do things is we get the water off the property as quickly as possible, put it in a pipe and put it to the next ditch or wetland or stream. And so when it rains and we have a really large rain event, that water is delivered really quickly to that stream, and it just kind of blows out the habitat, causes all the erosion and everything you see in this picture. Where here, this stream is like in the 10% less impervious surface, you know, water gets to it slowly and naturally, not through pipes and where it blows it out like this. So this Orchards Mall area, if you're familiar with it, as you can see, the areas that aren't highlighted in that light blue, basically all the water from those areas are going right into a pipe, right out to this little stream, and just blowing it away every time we have a big rain event. The areas in the blue have some treatment where they're trying to put it in detention ponds a little bit, try to slow it down a little bit, but it's kind of not enough to deal with all of that impervious surface. So we're trying to rethink the way that we manage this water off of developed areas. We want to slow it down, spread it out, and soak it in as much as possible. So these are green roofs, there are rain gardens, there's pervious pavement, and all this, anything where we get that water to slow down and soak in is what we're looking for. So the problem is to go back and retrofit these areas, of course, is way more expensive than if we would have done it up front, just like anything else, right? So I'm working with municipalities and try to change their regulations of how we develop and try to do this stuff, you know, when it's going in, instead of having to come back in and try to do it later when it's expensive. But we have had some success. This is actually the Meyer parking lot. And this is on Black Friday, and one of the busiest shopping days of the year. And the parking lot isn't even anywhere near full. The only parking lot that got, and this was pre-COVID, this was like before, you know, it was still before, and there was internet shopping, but it still wasn't as big as it is now. This was done several years ago, so, actually in 2015. So that's how much the parking lot is being used on one of the busiest days of the year. We've looked at all the parking lots in this area. The only one that even came close to even being close to full, but not even, was Walmart. All the rest of them were like this, barely, about half used. So we don't have a parking problem like downtown St. Joe or some of our communities. We have a parking lot problem too much. So we set out to try to encourage folks to do what we call these large rain gardens. And our first one that we did was on Whiteman's property right off of Pipestone here. It's just east of I-94. And this is in that big red area that we're trying to fix. And so right now, before we did this, the water would come off their huge building and parking lot and go into that storm drain right there and go straight to Ox Creek. So again, we wanted to slow that down. So we ended up putting in this big rain garden and then building up the entrance to that storm drain. And so now the water goes into there, the plants filter it, so it kind of filters the water. And then if we get enough rain, it may overtop that and go to the creek. But again, it's going to be a much slower pace and cleaner than what we were seeing before.
Marcy,
So,
do you mind speaking up, maybe moving the mic up and speaking up a little bit? It's kind of hard to hear in the back.
Yep, I can do that. Is that better? Okay. Then the next one we just completed was in the Meyer here in Benton Harbor. We actually took out that large parking lot that sits between the store and the gas station and put this huge rain garden in. If you haven't seen it, it's pretty impressive. You're close by. It's kind of a mess with the construction over there, but it's kind of interesting to see. There's also these smaller ones in the parking lot where the drain inlets used to be. So we took those out, put the rain gardens there, so the water comes off the parking lot into that area, filters, and then it all ends up here, where again, it has more time to slow down and soak in and filter out before it enters into Ox Creek. So we just finished this project last fall. So this is brand new. Plants are still getting established, and so it's young, but it's so far working really well. And we're really excited about that. It's taken up, so it's treating almost all the water now that's coming off of the Meyer property. And so we've solved that problem. So pretty exciting. So I was gonna go into another project that we're working on, switch over to the Watershed River, which is in Cass County. Actually starts up in Berrien County up by Decatur, and then flows through the city of Watershed and down to Niles, where it enters the St. Joe River. And there's a dam, there was a dam, Pucker Street Dam, just outside of Niles on the Watershed River. Big dam. It actually was a wooden dam back in 1828, and over time it got built to this large structure you see here, and it was pretty much cutting off the entire Watershed River from the St. Joe River in terms of fish passage and all that. So we got involved with the city of Niles because they own the dam to help them find funding to remove it. The Watershed River, if you don't know, is an amazing resource in southern Michigan. It is one of the largest cold water trout streams. People come from all over to fish the Watershed. You go to the fishing sites and you'll look at the license plates, and they'll be from Nebraska, and they'll be from all over. And of course, a lot of Chicago people, because this is closer than having to go up to the Manistee or other rivers up north, and they can just come right here to Southwest Michigan. And these are actually, the guys in the boat are guys from a Trout Unlimited group out of Oak Brook, Illinois, who helped me a lot with collecting data on the Watershed River. So an amazing river system, lots of fish diversity. Of course, people like the salmon and the trouts and all that stuff. So this dam, we did a study of the entire St. Joe River watershed, and the Pucker Street Dam ranked #1 for removal because of the benefits it would have. We're going to be reconnecting 159 miles of stream, 11,000 acres of wetland that were cut off from the St. Joe River. We're going to restore the hydrology and the channel and the floodplain of about 2 miles where that dam was impounding the water. It was kind of stuck between a river and a pond. And it wasn't functioning well as either one. So when we took that out, we restored that hydrology through there. And then of course it benefited all the fish and macroinvertebrates and all the other species. That's where the dam used to sit, so that's what it looks like now. The grass is growing now. This was taken back. This project just finished up last year too, so very recent. It's beautiful through there. The Pucker Street Dam I always thought was just an eyesore, and now you go there and it's beautiful. Kind of the amazing thing about this project is it took a really long time. It was a huge project. When we first started working with this city, probably about 8 years ago, we thought it was going to cost about $4 million. And I'm like, that's, I'll get you some grant money and all that. Well, it ended up costing over about $12 million all in all to take this dam out. And one of the biggest reasons is the amount of sediment that had built up behind that dam over the decades and centuries that it was there. And we had to manage that sediment because the water below the dam up to St. Joe, the fishermen call that their holy waters. It's where the fishing is phenomenal and it's cherished. And so, of course, we could not let that sediment just go down and clog up all the fish habitat, and we took this dam out. So we had to physically remove all that sediment out of there before we could take this dam out. And that was why it cost so much. And we ended up taking out as much sediment as a 14-story building the size of a football field. So imagine that all filled with sediment is what we had to physically move out of that river system and put in other areas. So that was really expensive endeavor. And it took a long time to get all the permits, and but it turned out to be a wonderful project. The fishermen are extremely happy. We had some opposition at the beginnings. They were just like, "You cannot take this dam out, it's gonna ruin the fishery," and there were some that were just totally opposed to it. But the city did a wonderful job working with partners and got it out, and now the entire fishery is wonderful. And now the Pokagon Band is working to restore some meanders upstream of that, where we had done a meander restoration, about 15 years ago on the Watershed Park. Now the Pokagon Band is doing a bunch of restoration. This river was dredged and straightened, and a dam was built on it back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. It is seeing a total rebirth. It is amazing the amount of change that's happening on the Watershed River, and it's so exciting to see kind of all this be put back to the way it should be, and the fish and the wildlife that would benefit from it, and us too, of course. So,
Marcy,
yep.
what was done with the sediment?
Good question. A lot of it was used to kind of sculpt the new floodplain areas. A lot of it was at the site of the dam. There's a big area that folks use to access the river, so a lot of it was placed there. The city actually ended up buying the adjacent farm field, and they deposited a lot of it on that farm field. And the good thing was that when we did all the soil tests, that it wasn't contaminated, so we were able to leave it on site. If it would have been contaminated, it would have had to been all hauled off to a special landfill, and I don't even know what the cost would have been for that. So we were very fortunate for that, but it's all in those areas along there. Yeah.
That's not the dam that had the salmon run on it.
There was not a fish ladder on this dam. The ones on the St. Joe at Berrien Springs and the one at Buchanan all have fish ladders. So the fish can get up, and so now they can get up all the way up the Watershed. Because there was no fish ladder on the Watershed, they were stuck there and couldn't move up the Watershed system. Now they can get all the way up to here. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is our water trails. And some might wonder, well, what's that about improving or protecting water quality? We feel that it's really important when people can get out and experience our rivers and streams and lakes and spend time on them. You know, it helps to build the appreciation, the stewardship of these waterways. And so we spend a lot of time working with communities to improve the water trails, and we improve access sites to them and help with promotion of them. There's some materials on the back if you're interested about water trails and other things I talked about, to promote these water trails, to get people out using them, like I said, appreciating the resources. These are the major rivers that we have established water trails on. So we're trying to get, the goal is to get access sites about every 5 miles at a minimum, and so that people can get out and get on these waterways. There's a really nice website, MichiganWaterTrails.org. If you go there and you click on Southwest Michigan, then all of those water trails I just talked about come up, and then you can click on each one, and it shows you where all the access points are and has little descriptions about them. It's a wealth of information, this site, if you're interested in paddling in Michigan. Just to highlight a few, the Paw Paw River Water Trail. We've worked with all the communities from Paw Paw to Benton Harbor and the Pokagon Band, because they own property near Hartford, to maintain this pathway. This river has a lot of trees that fall down, and when the storms come through and block the pathway. So we collect funds from all the communities along the way, and then we hire contractors who go out and cut a pathway through the logs. And they've all been trained by the DNR because we want to leave some woody debris in the river for fish habitat. We don't want to just take it all out. So they're very intentional about creating, about an 8 to 10 foot path that you can get your canoe or kayak through, and leaving the rest for the habitat of the fish and other critters. So these are all the access points along the river. Some of them are nicer than others. Communities now are trying to do these handicap accessible launches. They're really nice. There's one in Riverside now. There's one in Waterville, one in Lawrence, and we're working to put one in Hartford so that it's a lot easier to get in and out of your kayak or canoe with those. The Watershed I was just talking about, we're trying to get all the access points on here. Where the Pucker Street Dam was, they just got a grant to improve that access area. So now that the dam is gone, it's going to be improved for access and use. But it's, again, really nice. There's always logs down. You go and clear it and they come back down. This one we're not actively paying contractors to go out and do, but the fishermen do a pretty good job of keeping it clear because obviously they want to use it. So that's kind of a win-win for them and for the public who wants to get out and get on the Watershed River. Now the St. Joe is obviously bigger. Trees aren't an issue there. That's just a bigger river and more paddling. So the Gleam River is a beautiful river. New Buffalo Township just put in a new launch at Glassman Park. There's the DNR launch off of Red Arrow, and then you can paddle all the way into New Buffalo at the boat launch there. And it's a wonderful marsh. It's a totally different experience being on the Gleam than being on the Watershed or the Pawpaw. So that's what's kind of cool is we just have so many different types of paddling experiences for people to do here in Southwest Michigan. Has anybody been out on any of the rivers?
The Galena is run is going into the harbor and from right now.
Yeah. Good. So that's kind of what I wanted to touch on today. I just wanted to leave with kind of my standard thing is clean water begins at home, simple things that we do, picking up after your pets, making sure you dispose of household hazardous waste. Don't ever dump anything down the storm drain. Keep them clear of leaves and grass clippings. Minimize your chemical use outside if you can. All of that, we all can make a difference. There's obviously these big projects I talked about, but really it's everybody doing their part in the watershed. We're all downstream from somebody, so we all need to do our part. And then I'll just leave you with, there's a lot of information on our website, let's keep it blue.org, and then there's a bunch of local organizations too that are working on these issues. And I can make sure that you have a copy of this PowerPoint that can be shared if you guys want that. So that's all I have for you today. If there's any questions.
Thanks, Marcy. We'll take some questions. I just want to say I have the pleasure of having Marcy serve on a committee that I chair in Richmond, and she brings so much energy and creativity to everything that we approach. She's a terrific grant writer and all that, and I think she's probably as at home here in a conference room as she is wearing hip boots and a field jacket out in the wetland. So she's a real trooper when it comes to swamps and bogs and other marshy places that have fierce creatures in them. So, thank you. Any questions? Clark, you want to start?
I have a couple of policy questions.
Yes.
One is, does the Planning Commission now, when someone is putting in a parking lot larger than X by X, do you expect them to present a plan to you explaining how they're going to drain it, slow the water down, some of the things you described? The second question came to my mind early in your presentation when you showed the difference in water quality averages between Northwest Indiana and southwest Michigan. And we all know that that St. Joseph River runs through both. I wondered to what extent there are collaborations on policy between the two states.
Great questions. So the first one, I only wish I had that authority to look at parking lots before they went in and said, you need to do it this way. But our agency has authority over nothing. So it would be your local township, your city, your village, that those plans go through those planning commissions of your local government. I have for 20 years been trying to convince local governments to put better standards in their site plan review processes that say exactly that. If you're gonna put in, first of all, don't put in too much parking.
Right.
Look at your laws, and because a lot of times this stuff is in policy that you have to have that much parking. And we need to, so I'm working with folks to try to change that. Let's have minimum parking instead of maximum parking. And so that's one thing. And then also, like I said, for these practices, I've been working with communities on their master plans and their zoning ordinances, trying to convince them to put this in their policies. I feel like Southwest Michigan has been slow to come to these ideas than other parts like Grand Rapids and Ann Arbor and Chicago and places like that. I don't know if it's just because we do have such wonderful resources and they're not seeing the effects of it quite as easily as they might in bigger areas. So it's been hard to convince local governments to make those changes. I've been at it for over 20 years and it's getting better and easier. The other main key player is the county drain commissioner, and he does have some authority on some of that stuff if it's going into a county drain. And he'll review plans, and often he's, at least the one in Berrien County and the one in Cass County, they're pretty water quality minded and try to encourage developers to do the right thing. But I think there should be more, personally, I think there should be more teeth in the laws to not just ask for it, but to require a little bit more. So that's that. The second question was about cooperation between Michigan and Indiana. Friends of the St. Joe River is a bi-state organization, nonprofit. So there's that organization. They just had their annual meeting a couple of weeks ago. It was wonderful. People from both sides of the state line coming together and talking about improvements and working together. So there's some of that. There's also some collaboration between the state governments, especially and through EPA. A lot of the E. coli issues that were coming down to St. Joe were coming from South Bend, and they were having sanitary sewer overflows. And they were under a mandate from EPA to get those fixed. Where St. Joe and Niles and our communities were proactive and had fixed them. Of course, they're not as big as South Bend, and it probably wasn't as costly, but they hadn't gotten our side of the line fixed, and EPA stepped in and is forcing South Bend to fix their problem. So, if you want to call that cooperation or collaboration, I don't know. A forced cooperation by the EPA. So there's those types of things going on too.
So we had a lot of hands up. You go ahead.
You were mentioning planning commissions, and I'm from Indiana. I moved up here 6 years ago, and I was talking to somebody else. Your structure is so different.
It is.
And I know it's difficult because you had planning commissions or no planning commissions in many places. But when you go to the planning commission, do you go to planning commission meetings or do you meet with them? Because my question really is, are there ever people from just the general population at any of these planning commissions meetings?
Yeah, so first, yes, Indiana and Michigan are structured very differently. Michigan has townships that do their own planning and zoning. So in Berrien County alone, there's 39 municipalities doing their own planning and zoning. So in our 3-county area, there's over 150 local municipalities, and I'm one person. I'm trying to get to them and, try to educate them to do better. But it's hard in Michigan because of this very localized system of the townships. In Indiana, townships don't do planning and zoning. It's either at the city or village or the county level. And so it's a lot harder in Michigan to get to all these. And then of course townships have varying levels of sophistication and capacities, right? A very rural township of 1,200 people, they have no staff. They're all, farmers, volunteers that sit on the planning commissions and boards, and that's bad. It's just, they don't have a lot of capacity and money to do the type of planning and policies that may probably need to be in place, right? So it's challenging in Michigan. Then appreciate you noticing that, because a lot of people I don't think understand that to that level unless you've come here from somewhere else. But I do go both. I meet with a lot of planning commissions. I work on their master plans. I just worked on Buchanan's. I'm working on Lisa townships. I'm getting ready to do Decatur, Hamilton. So when I'm doing master plans, I put this stuff in their master plans and talk about the importance of water and these types of practices that should be implemented. We make resources available to anybody who wants them. So planning commission calls, we'll go meet with them, talk to them, provide them maps, do whatever we can to help them. So we're out there as much as we can be, trying to educate and get this stuff in the plans when we can.
We have a question in the front row here. Yes, sir.
I was going to say, I serve on the Three Oaks Planning Commission, and we always have someone from the community there that are in attendance at the meeting.
That's great.
Can't remember a meeting in which we didn't have someone coming to talk about. But I also had a question about our master plan. When we developed the master plan, I know we sent it on to other nearby communities, and we sent it to the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. When you receive that,
We usually don't. It's not required to be sent to us. It's required to be sent to the county. But we usually don't get them. Some people do send them to us, but usually they do not.
I think we said it.
Okay.
But what I was wondering is that if you do get them, do you review them and make suggestions back to the community in terms of how it can be improved as it relates to water?
Yeah.
So the question is, when local government units, Three Oaks, for example, does a master plan, do they come to Marcy's organization and are they reviewed?
Yeah, so they're not required, so governments aren't required to send us their plans. They are required to send the recreation plans. They're not required to send the master plans, which is really strange. Some do. Unfortunately, we do not have the capacity to look at all of them and comment on them. We work on the other ways. If you're working on the master plan and you call me and say, Marcy, I need some maps, I need some text, or you want to hire me to write your master plan, then that's where we come in. We just don't have the capacity to review all the plans from all of those local units coming in. We just don't have the funding or capacity to do it.
Bill?
Yeah, so you mentioned the county drain commission. So I work in Berrien. I'm the treasurer of the township. So I think Sam Quatrain came in and talked about, a plan for our watershed in Berrien and connecting them and doing an overall repair. What considerations, does he come to you at all? And you sort of, indicated maybe sometimes. And what considerations should a township be aware of in thinking about what they're going to do and whether it is an issue from your understanding?
That's a hard question to answer because the drain commissioner is involved in all kinds of projects on his county drains. Drain commissioners have been around for a long time, and a lot of things in the past have been about, draining the lands, draining the wetlands in our area for farmland or for development. Luckily, the drain commissioners, I feel, are more cognizant about not just draining land and moving water, that they care more about water quality. Christopher Quatron, who's the Berrien County Drain Commissioner, I feel like he's trying to do a better job in bringing in consultants that understand water resources and how to manage them. So it just depends on the scale of the project and the details. I mean, every project is just so different that I can't say it's good or bad. It's it just depends like what the objectives are of the project, what they're trying to accomplish.
It's very specific to the township.
It's very specific. Yeah, I mean, I'd be willing to meet with you maybe afterwards or something to talk more about it, because I just, without any details, I don't know.
We don't have any.
Okay.
So we had some questions back here. Yes, back there. Sorry for
I'm curious
pointing.
about the Meyer and the Whiteman Rain Garden projects. How do those projects get funded?
So both of those were grant funded. I wrote both of the grants. The Whiteman was part of a bigger grant for the Pawpaw River Watershed, and that was just a piece of it. There was a bunch of other work going on in the Pawpaw with protecting wetlands and restoring wetlands, and then we did that rain garden. There was a local match, and Whiteman provided some money for that, and obviously the land to do it. The Meyer one, again, I wrote that grant. It actually went through the Drain Commissioner's office, and Meyer's contribution was that they donated the property that large rain garden is on to the Drain Commission office, and now it's part of the county drainage system. And so that was an outlot. They estimated it was worth almost $500,000 they donated to build a rain garden. So pretty significant contribution, but the actual construction of it was funded with the grant dollars from, it's EPA money that comes through the state EGLE, Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, to the locals.
More questions back here? Yes.
You mentioned pervious surfaces for parking lots, and I'm just wondering, it just seems like such a terrific idea. Why isn't it more used? Why don't people build pervious driveways? Could you just say something about that?
Yeah, it's actually more economical to do at like a home site or your personal residence. Once you get to these bigger sites, it gets really expensive and the maintenance gets pretty tough. They are doing it in Grand Rapids, Ann Arbor, Chicago, and they have the equipment to maintain it. Here, we don't have, none of the municipalities have equipment to maintain large parking lots where they have to pretty much almost like vacuum it. We have street sweepers, but not vacuums. So we don't have a good way to maintain it. So you're not gonna see a lot of it here until the price comes down and we have better ways to maintain it. The only really applications I've seen on a larger scale in this area is the Pagan Band on some of their properties has used some pavers. So they are doing it.
Faith?
Last week I was walking around St. Joe with a friend down near Silver Beach, and we were watching the dredging operation. And as we were watching it, at first what was coming out was this really dark, kind of gooey looking, and then it switched colors to more of a regular sand. And it got me to thinking, is anybody tracking what has ended up in that silt at the mouth of the river before they pull it out and dump it on the beach?
That's a good question. Probably not as much as we would like. They have to do some periodic testing to make sure it's not real contaminated or anything else serious. But it's, you know, in situations like this is an emergency dredging operation, so they probably don't have time to do all the testing and that. With the regular dredging, they probably do a little bit more. But yeah, it is picking up those real kind of silt that's coming off the farmlands and coming down the river, and then you get into patches where there's sand and it's picking that up. And I have another whole presentation I could do on just the St. Joe River and sediment transport and
how much sediment is coming down that they're estimating through the rivers. Of course, it's mostly coming, we're largely agricultural area, so a lot of that is coming from the farm fields, and we try to work with the conservation districts and write grants to work with farmers to do best practices like cover crops and buffers and no-till and all these kind of practices that would help keep that soil on their property instead of washing off into the rivers and streams and ending up in a harbor and costing millions of dollars to dredge. But again, farming has been here for a long time, and there's some that are more progressive than others and are doing better practices, and some that are just gonna probably keep doing it the way they've always done it. So, but that's another big source of the sediment, I would say, is because we're agriculture. You know, there's some, I feel like most of the big building projects we have under control, there's a soil and sedimentation control program. It's actually through the Drain Commissioner's office and the Conservation District, where they make sure you have silt fences and things in place, and they go out and inspect it if it's over a certain size, the development. So I feel like that's mostly under control, and there's some failures here and there with the silt fences and stuff, or things that get missed. But overall, we've got a system to deal with that. But the agriculture is all voluntary, so that's where we're at.
So maybe we'll take one more question and then give Marcy's voice a little rest, and maybe there's food. By the way, I noticed there's a lot of sandwiches and soup back there, so I think people should be feeling free, don't you, Faith, to take stuff home.
Oh, please.
I don't think there are many cookies left, but there's others. Okay, who wants to ask the last question? Right here, Nancy.
What are your concerns about the future in terms of keeping the rivers flowing and clean and so on? Does it have to do with corrosion in those septic tanks, or does it have to do with climate change? What should we be aware of that we may not even be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, climate change is definitely going to have impacts. We're already seeing them with the rises in water levels. Gene just sent out a bulletin the other day about how Lake Michigan's already starting to rise back up.
What's starting to rise?
Lake Michigan.
Oh, Lake
levels
Michigan.
are starting to go up again at some pretty quick pace.
Yeah, there's been a record snowfall and rain up north, and so now Superior is at about record levels. And Huron and Michigan, which are considered to be one lake because they're connected, they're also up 7 or 8 inches already this year.
So, I mean, that obviously is a huge concern, the uncertainty of, and how quickly they're rising and changing, and the effects of that are definitely a concern. Changes in the weather patterns that are contributing to that are all a concern. And you're seeing, of course, with those big storms, seeing more runoff, and just kind of everything is exasperated, seeing more flooding. We talk about infrastructure, culverts that can't handle these large flow events, and roads that are being washed out because of our infrastructure is not built to handle these large rain events that we're seeing. And so that's definitely worrisome, along with all of our other infrastructure things. I do think the E. coli issue, was really bad several years ago when we were doing all this testing, and the beach closures have kind of haven't been as frequent, but I don't think we do enough testing to really know. We test our beaches once a week, usually on Monday, and if it rains on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, there may be issues at the beach that we don't know about because we're not testing. So that's always a big concern, and with these changing climates and all that, probably exasperates it too. So again, that's a septic issue. Michigan is the only state in the United States that doesn't have a statewide sanitary code. So that's a huge policy issue. There's some movement. They've been trying to move this for years now with control by the Democrats. It's getting some attention now, but hopefully they'll be able to get that passed because We're the Great Lakes state, it's kind of crazy.
Are the dunes considered critical every 10 years, or is that the span, 10 years and then 10? We just got news that the dunes we're near are not considered a critical dune area, but anymore. But when the level goes up, if that's what you're saying, man, that's gonna be dangerous, because people have had to haul in those giant boulders in the past.
As far as I know, they haven't changed any of the critical dune geographies since I've been in Michigan for over 20 years. They've lessened the restrictions on the critical dunes.
That may be what it is.
That, yes, but the actual footprint of where critical dunes are and aren't is not changed to my knowledge in over 20 years.
Dorothy had a question, I missed her hand before, so.
Oh, I was going to ask if there's any legislation or policy changes that you're working on that the public could help, that we could educate the public on to help advocate for.
Yeah, this statewide sanitary code is a big one, I think, that could use people, people don't think about it, right? You know, you flush your toilet, it goes away, and they don't think about it. So I think that's one that could use some education, advocacy about. Gosh, right now it's a bunch of budget stuff that's just happening, but I would say that's probably the most critical one that I know of right now at the state level. Of course, these local policies, anything could help. And, you know, I think there's room for improvement in all our communities in Southwest Michigan and what we could be doing locally to help.
Marcy, thank you so much. Your presentation was informative and inspiring, and we really appreciate your taking the time to come and share your knowledge with us. I think that the more voters know about the environment they live in, the better prepared they will be to take action to protect our water, air, and land in their everyday lives and at the ballot box. And I think that makes a huge difference when we are able to elect representatives who care about the environment and know what the needs are and work on getting legislation through, especially now we have the bill in the legislature about the septic regulation, hoping that that will get through. And thank you all for your insightful questions and for coming out this afternoon. The League of Women Voters Berrien and Cass County continues to plan and put on programs like this to keep you informed and inspired and educated. Next month on June 22, we have our annual dinner meeting, and I'm hoping that you will all come. The speaker is Mr. Ken James from Muskegon Community College. He'll be speaking to us on diversity, equity, and inclusion. There is more details at the welcome table, and you'll get reminder emails in the weeks to come. If you would like to RSVP today, you can just write your name on the list, and you don't have to pay today. You will have to pay at the door when you come to the dinner, but not today. The League is looking forward to seeing you again, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you.